Sorry, guys. We'll be starting in a few minutes. I'm trying to set up everything, so you'll have to bear with me. For a few minutes. Because we're multi-streaming, sometimes can take a few minutes. Because sometimes the software decides to take a break. And you have to reset it, which is what happened last week and which is what appears to be happening today. But we're almost there, so if you bear with us for another minute or so. We'll be right with you. Perhaps you can hear me furiously typing away. Almost there. Thank you for your patience. We're nearly there. Okay. One more second and we should be ready to go. Where are we? One more piece of software to trigger. There we are. Make sure it's happening. Yes, it is. So, I don't know. A few moments. The software keeps telling me right. Sorry about that. Right, okay. I think we're all right now. one piece of software has a new version that it was trying to get me to download, and in the process causing problems. Right. Okay. We continue with the topic um, that we started last week, which is sources of uh, Islamic law, etc. So when we're going to do something, make a law or whatever, what's the fundamental things we go to? And of course, we said that the Holy Quran is the fundamental source of law, morals, everything else for Muslims. And basically, its verses can be categorized into three fields: science of what's called speculative theology, ethical principles, and rules of human conduct. And we can see that the last category, rules of human conduct, is directly concerned with Islamic legal matters. And it has about 500 odd verses. And 1/3 of the Quran is devoted to human behavior. And that is not just what you do personally, but also interaction um, between husband and wife and children and all that kind of thing. And our view, when I say our, I mean the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement, is that the Holy Quran is complete. There's nothing missing from it, and it's perfect. So there is no need to change anything in it. Whereas all other Muslim groups say that some verses are missing from the Holy Quran, and that some verses of the Holy Quran are abrogated. But we've shown, our research has shown, that these things are baseless. Now, let me use this book, Al-Fawz al-Kabir, Fi Usul al-Tafsir, which is by Hazrat Shah Waliullah. And it says that he discusses the principles of tafsir, and that is the explanation of the Holy Quran. And he devotes 15 pages to discussing this theory of abrogation. And in one place, he says that if we keep all the differences of opinion and everything in view, then the number of abrogated verses is countless. But then he says, even if you don't go to that extreme, the number of abrogated verses is over 500, more than 500. And then he discusses all these verses and so on, and he comes to this conclusion on page 67 of the version that I have. And he says, as is clear from the above discussion, as far as I'm concerned, abrogation of more than 5 verses of the Holy Quran cannot be proven. So Hazrat Shah Waliullah brings down the number of abrogated verses from several hundred at least to 5. But Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib, the Mujaddid of the 14th century of Hijrah, and his companion Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali, they showed that none of the verses of the Holy Quran have been abrogated. Going to the other theory that the Holy Quran is incomplete, for example, because generally Muslims say punishment of adultery by a married man or woman is stoning to death. And but that is not in the Holy Quran. And they say that some pages were lost because a goat ate some pages on which some verses of the Holy Quran were written. And if that is true, then of course the Holy Quran is not complete. And if it's not complete, it's not perfect. But we have shown, for example, by using the argument that during the month of Ramadan, the whole of the Quran is recited from beginning to end. And there were people, many people around at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad and Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar and so on, who knew the Holy Quran by heart. And if anything had been missed out, they would have pointed it out. We're not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 people. We're talking about hundreds. So I'm just giving you brief arguments about how we refuted the theory of abrogation and the theory of incompleteness. And this momentous task was done by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who was, as I said, the Mujaddid of the 14th Islamic century. And this is what a Mujaddid, a reformer, this is what he is going to do. Refute incorrect beliefs of the Muslims and provide answers to allegations, etc., that people raised against Islam. Now, we move on to Sunnah, which is the second source of law, guidance, morality, etc. for Muslims. And we saw last week that the Holy Quran says, obey Allah, obey the Prophet, and obey those in authority among you. So Sunnah is the next important source because the Quran says, obey the Prophet. Now, one thing we have to remember is that people confuse Sunnah and books of Hadith. The two things are entirely separate. Sunnah refers to the actions of the Holy Prophet. And, people saw the Holy Prophet do something and they copied him, they followed him. For example, Azan is not in the Holy Quran. Its words were approved by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and he called Hazrat Bilal to call the Azan, the call to prayer, in those words. People were present, they saw and heard that, and they continued that practice. even after the Holy Prophet had passed away. Wudu is actually mentioned in the Holy Quran, but then the Holy Prophet actually showed what those verses means. How we pray, that is not mentioned in the Holy Quran in specific terms. And again, the Holy Prophet showed Muslims how to pray. Now, his actions are divided into two parts. One is what the Holy Prophet actually actively did, like the way he performed the prayers. And the other thing is that he saw something or someone do something, and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not forbid it, did not disapprove of it. And we have to remember one important aspect, and that is that Sunnah is also used to mean voluntary as opposed to fard or duty in terms of, for example, prayers. So we have the Zohar prayer, and people say that, in Jummah prayers, for example, at Zohar time, we say 2 rakah sunnah, 2 rakah fard, and 2 rakah sunnah again after the prayer. So it also stands to mean, it does mean what the Holy Prophet Muhammad did, because the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would voluntarily say extra prayers. And this is how the name has become associated with these things. Now, the other thing to remember about Sunnah is this, that sometimes the Holy Prophet approved two different actions, and they were different. And there is an incident when two companions of the Holy Prophet were going somewhere together, and they were out in the wilderness, and the time for a prayer came, and they said their prayers. But because they had to perform wudu or ablutions, and as the tradition is, that if water is not available, you just strike your hand on clean, dry earth and just use that. Because, as I mentioned in a khutbah recently, there is a spiritual element to this cleanliness as well as a physical element. So it's like washing your mouth out. There's the physical action that you're washing your mouth out, but there is also the spiritual element that I will clean my mouth and I will not do anything wrong, say anything wrong, lie, cheat with my tongue, etc. So anyway, the time for prayer came, and there was no water available, so they performed the yamam, as it's called, and said their prayer. And they went a few yards ahead, and a short time later, while it was still time for that prayer. Remember, people look at clocks and say that it's time for so and so prayer. Remember, the time for a prayer stretches from one prayer to the next. So anyway, so it was still time for that prayer. So one of the companions, he used water for his ablutions, and then he prayed again. And the two then went to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and said, which one of us did the right thing? And the Holy Prophet approved both their actions. He said that the person who just hit his hand on the dry earth and used that, performed a sort of symbolic ritual, physical cleanliness, he was correct as well because it is allowed. But the person who later on used water to wash himself and then he prayed again, he would also be rewarded for trying to be more meticulous as well. And basically, he was saying that they were both correct. And a conclusion that you can draw from this is that the Holy Prophet applied a great deal of latitude in these things. Muslims, these days they're so strict and stuffy and so on, this is so and so, and, etc., etc. But then the thing to remember is that even actions can need interpretation. There were some Bedouins who came to Medina and they wanted to embrace Islam. So they went to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they embraced, they said, Islam. And they wanted the Holy Prophet Muhammad to send some people with them, some teachers, to preach Islam to their tribe. So the Holy Prophet sent one or two people with them. And a few days later, while the teachers were sleeping, these Bedouin killed the teachers and looted their property, horses and camels and things, and disappeared. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, as soon as he heard what had happened, he got together a posse, as they would call in Western movies, and sent them after these people, who found them and they killed them. Now, generally people say that these people were killed. Why? Because they had given up Islam. And that was the reason for their execution. But I disagree with that. Because if you look at the sequence, these people had murdered two Muslims. And I say no, it had nothing to do with the change of religion, because really they had never embraced Islam. But the main thing was that they actually killed some human beings and robbed them. So the punishment was for that robbery and that murder. So you can see that even where there is a clear action by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, at some point, there can be a difference of opinion. I don't believe that, because another reason is that I say that the Holy Quran says, La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in religion. At another place, the Holy Quran says, your duty is to deliver the message. Once you've done that, your duty finishes. That is the end of it. So how can someone changing their religion cause them to be executed? And I said that they were executed because they actually were guilty of murder. So you can see there is a clear action of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when we look at it, it can lead to uh, disagreement. And then the third source of Islamic law is the Hadith. And one thing we have to remember, that a lot of Sunnah is actually written in Hadith. But remember that books of Hadith were not compiled. I think the earliest one was around 90 years after the Holy Prophet Muhammad. So does it mean that for 90 years no one called the azan? Does it mean that for 90 years no one performed the salat and so on? No, it doesn't. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, what differentiates Sunnah, which is related to the actions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, from other hadiths, which are not related to actions and so on. Inshallah, next week we will go through the hadith, which is the third source of Islamic law, and show that we have to be careful in selecting the hadith, because there were many people who fabricated. They embraced Islam during the era of Hazrat Umar or Hazrat Usman and so on, and they would fabricate hadith for their own purposes. This is all for today. For next week, we'll talk about hadith, and the week after, we'll talk about other sources. For example, if something is not mentioned in the Holy Quran or the Sunnah or the Hadith, what do we do? How do we come upon a ruling to show what the Islamic teaching is in regard to a matter that is not mentioned there? Heart transplant, any transplant for that matter, is not mentioned in the Holy Quran, it's not mentioned in the Hadith, and so on. So, with a prayer that whoever you are, wherever you may be, may Allah keep all of you safe and sound and free from harm. I take my leave of you, but I want to remind you that we are members of Ahmadi Anjuman Ishaat Islam, also known as Lahori Ahmadis, and we believe in the absolute finality of prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. No prophet can now come, whether an old prophet or a new prophet. Reformers will come when God deems it fit to teach Muslims where they have gone wrong, or help them defend Islam against non-Muslims, but nothing more. With that, I take my leave of you. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.